and I'll say this, explicitly. My sobriety has nothing to do with anybody else, right? Like, if you enjoy beer and it makes your life better and you have fun with it, like, absolutely do it. I also don't like broccoli, but that's not an indictment of anybody who, eats broccoli, right? Like, but so, I basically just said, okay, this is like not, I'm not going to mess with this stuff.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians talking about their lives, music, and craft beer. We had a glorious weekend. I most certainly did. This Vox and Hops episode is presented by Heavy Montreal. Heavy Montreal are Montreal's premier metal promoter, and we have teamed up to bring you Heavy Montreal Presents Vox and Hops Brutal Montreal 2022. This year's event is happening on September 2nd at Corona Theater and features Deicide performing their classic album Legion in its entirety, along with Cataclysm, who are performing their classic album Serenity and Fire in its entirety, and we have Inhuman Condition that is opening up the gig. Tickets are flying for this show. If you want to come, you better pick some up soon via the link in the description of this podcast. You don't want to miss it. I'm going to be there. We're going to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer together. Do it. You'll regret it if you do not. I'm beyond stoked to have Heavy Montreal behind the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to ask you to follow the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I would love for you to rate it and write a review. Now, why do I want to do that? Well, you have to imagine that when someone is looking for a new podcast to listen to, what do? They scroll down, they look at those ratings, they look at the reviews, and if the reviews state that the podcast is amazing, that I'm a great host, that all my guests are super cool, and I ask great questions, well, they're most probably going to give Vox and Hops a chance. So by you writing a review, you may actually persuade someone to become a brand new Vox and Hops head, and that would be something that I would truly appreciate. Now, today on the podcast, I'm with Matt Medeiros of Kalopsia and Ruinous. Get ready, everyone. This is Vox and Hops episode number 347.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with Matt Medeiros of Kalopsia, Ruinous. He used to be in Tombs. He's a cool dude. He was introduced to me from an excellent person called Michel Ayoub, who runs Turbo House, which shirt I'm wearing right now. Matt, how you doing?
Awesome. We've got two Matt M's here today, so
I know.
Hopefully we can tell each other apart.
I'm on a roll with Matts. I didn't have very many Matts on the podcast, and then recently I've had a bunch, so that makes me happy. Let's jump straight into the shittiest question I'm going to ask you. How did you cope with the glorious years, plural, of 2020, 2021, and hopefully not more of 2022? How have you been coping throughout these crazy, crazy times?
The shortest answer is simple carbohydrates. Just a bad idea. Just to keep it real. We had we lost some people. We had some hardships. I have a job I can do remotely, so I was keeping very busy with work. And I think like a lot of people, it was like, all right, let's figure out things we can do, things we can double down on, right? So keeping busy with work, taking care of family. But then, the rest of the time it was like, all right, we're going to have a Zoom movie night, right? Yeah. So everybody's going to start Terminator 2 Judgment Day director's cut at the same time.
Yes.
Right. And so classic movies, schlocky movies. I figured out how to get, Twitch working on my Xbox. So,
amazing.
So some friends, hanging out, playing God of War, being bad at video games.
Yeah.
Stay inside, watch movies, listen to music, and play video games. It's like, okay, so just relive the best parts of my teenage years. Okay, cool. I was working with Tombs at the time, and we did literally a week before the shutdown. It was February 28th, 2020. We had the record release show for the Monarchy of Shadows EP that came out on Season of Mist. And, we had geared up for touring on all that. But, obviously with everything getting shut down, Mike Hill is not a dude to rest on his laurels. So it was like, all right, let's just do the full length. So we actually had Under Sullen Skies come out in November of 2020. So we had an EP and a full length come out 9 months apart, or Irish twins as we might call it. So then it was just like, hey, let's shoot a video for web stream. Let's do Slay at Home. Kept really busy. And so, just, I think everybody was just trying to figure out, how do you keep your head above water? How do you do cool stuff? How do you do things safely? And, we made it, right? Like here we are, things are opening back up, and, these are biblical events, right? So the fact that we're able to be here talking about satanic tea and death metal is actually very, very cool. So I'm very happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And you guys definitely did hit the ground running throughout the pandemic. 2 releases in 1 year during a pandemic, a live stream, being a part of Slay at Home. Definitely interesting ways to stay in contact with your fans. Satanic Tea. This episode is actually, I'll say it again. This episode is actually presented by Pitch Black North, the Satanic Tea Company. Dominic, the dude that runs this, I love him to death. He really makes incredible tea products, and they're all the most blasphemous stuff you can get your hands on. This is actually the one he made for Cryptopsy, called None So Vile. It is a black lavender tea with hops in it, because anything that I have to get my hands on, I need to sneak some hops into it, obviously. So cheers to Dominic for hooking this up and creating this and sending you a pack of it. Talk to me, how do you think about it? What are your impressions of None So Vile?
I mean, first of all, it's delicious. It honestly, like, I'm still in coffee hours of the day, right? But I'm drinking this black tea, and it's got a really rich flavor profile, and then also it's got like disgusting cover art, which is a plus. I think it's awesome. I literally, before we started, I was on the Pitch Black North site, and I'm like loading up a cart. So Dominic Dominic did the classic sales trap where I got a free sample and now I'm hooked. So yeah, just awesome.
Dude, that's awesome. And when you do check out, you can use the promo code VOX&HOPS15. You'll save 15% off of your entire purchase, as I drop that in there right there. And the artwork is really good. It's Tarmouth is the artist's name on Instagram, and honestly, this is a much tamed down version to the original idea I had. So good for him for making it much more PG, despite my children being afraid of it.
If it doesn't scare children, is it really metal?
Exactly. I'd love to hear about the soundtrack of your youth when you're growing up in your parents' or guardians' house. What music was playing when you were not in control of the radio? What music did your parents or guardians listen to?
Yeah, so I got to give credit where it's due. My parents had pretty good taste. I grew up in the 80s, so there's a lot of classic rock stuff going on. Obviously I'm from New Jersey, so Bruce Springsteen for sure.
Yes.
Tom Petty, Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, the Beatles. And then, just the stuff that was on rock radio at the time, which was like Men at Work, Huey Lewis and the News. Thriller was an inescapable cultural phenomenon at that point in time. So, I have to give credit where it's due. Mom and dad and the friends had a good taste in music.
How about the first band that you brought into the house that you exposed your parents to, whether they enjoyed it or not?
So, the first batch of cassettes, it all started in 1992. It was Metallica's Black Album and Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction and Nirvana Nevermind. Those were the 3 like first, forays into heavier music. And yeah, just obsessively like played them till the tapes wore out. And then later, it was Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera. And I saw Guar on Beavis and Butthead. And so I got America Must Be Destroyed on cassette. And that was sort of the beginning of the end. Next comes Slayer, and you just go down that path till all of a sudden you're listening to Deicide, Suffocation, Malevolent Creation, Cannibal Corpse, et cetera, et cetera.
What was your parents' reaction to the more extreme stuff once you started getting into that?
I have a really funny memory of a friend of mine gave me Vulgar Display of Power as a gift for, I think it was for 8th grade graduation or something like that. And mom had to do an inspection, and she saw the title Fucking Hostile, and of course she was no stranger to the world of rock and roll or the world of shock rock or anything like that. And she just looks at it, she goes, "Fucking Hostile? Really? Just go." And she hands me the tape, and I go upstairs and I listen to that tape 1,000 times. Yeah, I had a very cool mom who indulged she indulged my weirdness as long as I like wasn't getting into like any kind of serious trouble.
I think it's important to put those like loose boundaries with your children, because if not, you're going to rebel, right, and dive even deeper into the stuff you're not supposed to do, maybe.
Well, also it's like, it's how you raise adults, right?
Yeah.
Like adults have to be responsible for themselves. They have to be able to use good judgment and make good decisions. So you have to let people do that gradually over time. You know, I don't have kids myself, but I have 1,000 nieces and nephews who range in age from 13 to 22 now. And so, you know, if you don't let them explore, you don't let them learn, then, you know, you're going to pay for it later. So
I wonder how they do it nowadays with parents, because, you know, as your mother did, it came into the house, it was a physical object. You could see with the song titles. Nowadays, it's all in the cloud. It's all digital.
Man, if I had an iPad when I was 13, I think we'd be doing this interview from a correctional facility. Just, you know, just
the worst things at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Oh no. How about your first shows? Do you remember the first show that you went to go see? And was it Bruce Springsteen? Because that'd be cool.
I actually have never seen Bruce Springsteen live. He did a theater tour in New York a couple of years ago, and literally I saw the notification. I texted a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, I'm going to get tickets for this. Do you want to go?" He didn't get back to me in like a half hour, and so when I went to order the tickets, they were already sold out. But you know, I'd obviously gone to like some local shows, you know, seeing bands play at, you know, halls and whatnot. But my first like real deal, you know, professional concert was, and I looked this up, was October 15th, 1994, at a place called Studio One in Newark, New Jersey. And it was the Fiends and the Dickies, and they were opening for Gwar.
Really? Okay.
So
from that album, and then you had to go see them. That's a huge first show, like an experience.
Yeah, no, it completely ruined me for like all future shows. It was like, is this better than Gwar?
Yeah.
You know, and the answer was always no. And they were my favorite band at the time. So I was super, super geeked out. Fun piece of trivia about that show. It was so hot in the club that Odorous passed out.
No way.
And Dave Brockie sang the rest of the set backstage in a towel. I found video of it actually this week as I was prepping for this interview. And, you know, there's the grand finale, you know, Ballsack doesn't have his helmet on, Beefcake doesn't have his helmet on,
because it's
Odorous
that hot.
is not on stage.
Yeah.
It's like that, like disgustingly hot. And I just thought like, oh, this is just like,
this is what the
professional
show is.
shows. Yeah. Professional shows are supposed to be 120 degrees indoors. And yeah, just wild. Very
unbelievable. Cool. I've toured with Gwar in Canada. We replaced a band that couldn't come up, or someone had gotten injured, and Cryptopsy jumped on. And the amount of work that they do to make that show happen is incredible. They are some of the hardest working people in extreme music. It's just unbelievable.
My love for Gwar is extremely well documented. You know, they were my favorite. They were my absolute favorite band for many, many years, just purely on a musical level, because they were so ferocious, but also so musical. Yeah. And, you know, and then obviously like I went down the rabbit hole of like Slave Pit Singles and like Death Piggy and all that stuff. And just, you know, I've got the Gwar coffee table book over here with, you know, all the photos and flyers and all that stuff. And just the amount of, you know, as I got older and started to, you know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes of making, you know, live performances happen. It's like the amount of creativity that goes on behind the scenes is just insane. You know, from the creature design, you know, the characters, the fabrication, you know, the fact that they do all this stuff themselves. It's just so awesome. You know, I'm you know, fortunate to be friends with, you know, Sean McGrath, and, you know, he's obviously, you know, close with Gwar, and they like helped inform sort of how Ghoul operates. And it's just amazing. It's astonishing to me that they continue to, you know, I mean, geez, this show was in 94. 28 years ago. And that was not their first show. They'd already been going for, you know,
10,
several years at that point.
15 years at that point, yeah.
And so, you know, it's just, I don't know, like a one of a kind band musically, a one of a kind band in terms of performance. And, you know, they have records I love, they have records I don't like so much, but, you know, they've been consistently going after it and really just crushing. Like they're like the number one band that if I got a phone call, it's like, hey, we need a guy. Like, it's like, all right, like sell everything, like just disappear for 2 or 5 years, because that's you know, that's the band, you know, just and live they still crush.
Absolutely. As I was texting Zach Blair last night, actually, who was in Guar for a moment.
Yeah.
There's 2 bands that I've toured with that when I think of them, I can immediately, you know how smell is such a strong proponent to bring you places. When I think of Guar, there's one smell, which is like rubber, caoutchouc. For some reason, I have the French name for some reason I have that in my head right now. But like this rubber tire smell. And then there's Watain, which is a different smell that I don't want to remember.
No one can forget the Watain's fragrance.
How about your first time on stage? Do you remember that show?
I do. So this was in 1994, about, I guess, like 6 months before I saw Guar. I did my first like local show.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. I was expecting it to be the opposite.
Yeah, no, you know, like the moment I got my first guitar, I just wanted to play shows. I wanted to make records. I wanted to do stuff. I didn't have the skill or the ability, you know, and one might argue I still don't, but you know, I said, hey, like, you know, I had guys, you know, there were other musicians in my school who, you know, besides like whatever we were doing musically in, you know, school band or whatnot, were also interested in, you know, rock and metal. And so I got together with a guy whose drum set I overheard at a friend's house.
Amazing.
And, you know, we
like,
started
he was his neighbor type thing.
Yeah. So
unbelievable. You know, I love this.
Yeah. So I was talking to my buddy, and then all of a sudden I hear just the drums to Sad But True. And I'm like, what? like he's like, it's like, oh yeah.
He does that all the time.
Matt lives over there. His name is also Matt. And he's like, it's like, yeah, Matt lives over there. I was like, oh, I didn't know Matt played drums outside of like marching band. And so the next day at school, I was like, hey, you play drums? He's like, yeah, obviously. I was like, no, but like, do you play like rock and roll drums? I heard you playing Sad But True. And he's like, yeah. I was like, you want to start a band? And he's like, okay. And that was the beginning of a series of unfortunate decisions that led me to where I am today.
It's all one bad decision at a time to get you there. What about that first show? Do you remember what comes to mind when you think about that first night? Or afternoon?
So first, thankfully, the singer of the band that was headlining that show blew out the PA during sound check, which I was secretly very grateful for, because my singing voice was and remains terrible. And so we were doing a bunch of covers. We had written 2 original songs, but they weren't very good, and we hadn't really sort of finessed them. And so we did, you know, some Metallica covers, some Nirvana covers. We did, you know, the Megadeth version of Anarchy in the UK. If you ever want to have a laugh, go to a show where a 13-year-old is singing Mother by Danzig, when his voice hasn't quite deepened just yet. I'm happy to report that the single VHS copy of that show was destroyed when a VCR fell off an entertainment unit. So there is there's no longer any evidence linking me to that sonic crime.
Another thing that I'm so grateful for, all these young artists that are coming up now, their first shows are going to live forever on the internet. And then when they become super big stars, hypothetically 20 years down the line, there's going to be all this documentation of them at their worst when you got to play shitty shows. You got to suck in order to get good.
I always said that, by the year 2030, you won't be able to hire anyone for any job where there isn't pictures of them drunk on the internet.
Exactly.
So, because that was scandalous, 20 years ago. Like, oh my God, we found this stuff about you. Now it's just, everything. But I think it's also just a change of the culture, because one of the cool things is, I mentioned Guar earlier and mentioned Death Piggy, like seeing the evolution of an artist, seeing the evolution of like a performance level is very cool. There are guys I know who, got really vigilant about their skills, and watching them evolve, through these snapshots over time, whether it be records, tours, or just like, hey, I'm shooting Instagram reels of me playing guitar, and like, 2 years later, you're like, wow, this guy is awesome. And then you go back 2 years and you're like, wow, this was a hell of a journey. So I think it's, I think it's as embarrassing as, mom busting out the baby photos with your prom date. But I also think that there's a cool side to it as well. As long as they don't get the crowd shots when there's only 4 people there, that's
you got to frame them right. You got to frame these shots right, people.
Zoom in.
Even now, I'm seeing tours happening, and I'm like, that doesn't look that good. This is a sober Vox and Hops episode, hence the satanic tea that we're drinking. Talk to me about your sobriety, if you're open to speaking about that. At what point did you become sober, or were you just never into drinking? I've spoken to a bunch of artists, so I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last time I had a beer, I was 6 years old. So it's been quite a while for me. Had a sip of dad's beer while he was watching football. And I know the tone of the show, so I'm gonna keep it light and keep it brief. Happy to delve in more. But I was exposed to a lot of addiction in my family and in my community, and I just said, this is not something that I really want to get involved with. When I was 11 or 12, when like the peer pressure was starting. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, I had a family member who passed away due to alcohol related causes. And I just said, okay, you know what, that kind of seals it. And so, and then at that point in time, people were like, well, what are you, straight edge? And I was like, no, because I don't care what other people do, like do what you want. And I'll say this, explicitly. My sobriety has nothing to do with anybody else, right? Like if you enjoy beer and it makes your life better and you have fun with it, like absolutely do it. Like I also don't like broccoli, but that's not an indictment of anybody who, eats broccoli, right? Like, but so, I basically just said, okay, this is like I'm not going to mess with this stuff. And that was a decision that was pretty firm, like pretty young. And so, high school, it was hard, like college, it was harder. And now, at this stage in my life, I know enough people who, have either like gone too far and pulled back, or, people who do things like, dry January or sober February or what have you. So it's not an issue anymore. It's just like not a thing I do. And so, it just, alcohol and drugs are lots of fun for lots of people. But given my family history and genetic proclivity, and also just my personality generally, like I'm not a person who does moderation as generally. So it's kind of, for me, it's kind of like all or nothing. And so I just said, all right, you know what, like maybe I'll drink some scotch for my 50th birthday, but until then, I just want to kind of keep things on the rails.
That's amazing that you discovered and realized and made the decision so young. I think that's the key thing that I've gotten out of what you just told me, that at such a young age, you knew that it wasn't right for you.
Yeah.
I think that it probably one of the best decisions you ever made, because who would have known what direction your life would have gone in had you not made that decision?
Well, unfortunately, I know exactly which direction it would have gone, because I've had to watch it play out with other folks. And I'm happy to be here. Like I'm a I can gripe about anything, right? I can complain about the kids being on my lawn, and the state of music these days, but in reality, like I have
old school death metal resurgence is upon us.
Yes, and we must stamp out the new metal revival. But in reality,
child.
I know. We're happy you came to the light, Mr. Bagaki. We're very happy you came to the light. But at the end of the day, it was a decision that I made that, I continue to just like, again, now at this point in my life, it's like that's just a thing. Like, but
I think probably the hardest years were definitely those earlier years when everyone else was getting into it. I can imagine putting myself back in time, a band situation where there's like a camaraderie. We're going to drink tonight. And you were like, no, I'm not going to. Those were probably the hardest days.
Well, I occasionally fill in for Hammer Fight, and if you want to talk about a band that drinks, I mean, their hits include Get Wrecked, I Didn't Feel Like Drinking Until I Started Drinking, their first album was called Chug of War, so,
and then here you are on stage with it's like John Jarvis with the booze hands now.
Yeah, so but everybody's like, what I found is everybody's cool as long as you're not a dick, and then also like it can be very convenient to have a designated driver around.
Oh hell yes.
When things get especially messy.
Oh hell yes.
Yeah.
Nowadays I think it's much more accepted, and people are much more open about either problems with addiction or just the I don't want to drink, and it's much more accepted than back in the 90s. So
yeah, well, and Alex from Ruinous actually just posted today, he had like a throwback photo of him, holding a beer bottle, and the last time he had a drink was 2002, and so like it's very cool. Like when we hang out, it's just kind of it's a different vibe, and like alcohol is a great social lubricant. It can be a lot of fun. There's lots of different flavors, lots of different things to taste, lots of different things to experience. But I treat it like a peanut allergy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very bad for me. That's it.
And you have no issues being around people that are partying, or
no, absolutely.
That's the wrong word. People that are drinking. Yeah.
I always say that other people drinking lets me have more fun. And then occasionally I get to be the person who regales people of like what actually happened last night.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't always tell the truth, which can be a lot of fun for me.
The reason I corrected myself before is because there's like this myth that partying means drinking, means taking drugs. I spoke to Chris from Party Cannon, who is also just never drank. He's just never into it. Talk to me about the fallacy of drinking means partying. You can still party and not drink.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, like, a lot of substances just they reduce your inhibitions, right? And so there's stuff that you wouldn't do sober that you would do after you had a couple drinks, right? And it might be something, might be something silly, it might be something reckless, it might be something, like, oh, I can't talk to that girl because I haven't had my liquid courage yet, or like I'm not going to jump off the roof of the van. Like, why would I do that?
Don't jump off the roof of the van, people. You got to go. You're on tour for a reason. It's to play the shows. You got to finish the tour. Someone just jumped into the crowd recently, broke both his legs. He's probably regretting that jump right now. Yeah, like especially when you're no longer 22 and bounceable. I always tell people, like, the alcohol can make you a little bit more impulsive and a little bit less intelligent, and I'm impulsive and stupid, so I'm down. Let's go. Like, let's get silly, let's get rowdy, let's get into some shenanigans. We're here to have fun. Like, why not? At the end of the day, if you're comfortable in your own skin and you're comfortable around the people that you're with, then you can have just as good a time. And the hangovers are way better.
like if you drink drink too much tea, you know.
Fuck yes. You just feel amazing the next day, people. Drink that satanic tea. Thank you for opening up about your sobriety. I really appreciate you being so honest about it all.
Absolutely.
Let's continue down the path of honesty and talk a little bit about you not being a part of Tombs anymore.
Yes.
Which I wasn't aware of. I was sitting down setting up for this, and I had just gotten a promo email from Katie from Seasons of Mist, and I was like reading through it, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm going to write her and tell her that I got a add-on coming up, but I didn't. And then I read the email properly, and I saw your name nowhere. So I asked you before we started recording. So
yes.
take that, please.
Yeah, sure. So so first, let me do the proper thing for my boys. You know, Tombs has a new EP out.
Ex Oblivion.
Or Ex Oblivion. Yeah. So there's it's 5 tracks. It's 1 new song. It's 2 covers, a Motorhead cover and a Gigi Allen cover, nice. And then 2 remixes of older Tombs songs. It is I guess it's out on Season of Mist. Or at least they're doing promo
it's dropping. It's dropping July 15th. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I texted Ninja before we got on here. I was like, dude, give me the one-liner, you know, because I didn't get the promo stuff. So, you know, if you look at the Tombs Metal Archives page, you know, Tombs cycles members quite frequently, and I think Mike likes to keep. I think Mike likes to keep new energy around him to sort of foster his creativity. So. When I originally joined in, I guess it was 2018, I was supposed to be a fill-in guy for a tour, right? They were like, hey, we have a new guy coming in. He can't do this tour. Do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, sure. And that tour instead turned into, you know,
4 years,
a few years, you know, a few years and some and some great releases and some great shows, some great touring experiences. Got me into the band Barishi, who are awesome.
Yeah, really.
You know, our buddies from Vermont. And yeah, so you know, over the course of the pandemic, we did the Slay at Home, we did the full live set video production, and then it was kind of silence for a little while, and then you know, Mike just said, hey, we're gonna do this as a 3-piece. And you know, that was sort of the end of it, which actually the timing actually wound up working out really well, because Alex had, you know, gotten in touch with me and was like, dude, we have all this new material, like when are we going to finish this record? And so, you know, for me it was a fun ride. That's
for Ruinous, right?
Yeah. So it was a fun ride. You know, I'm very happy with the work that I did around Monarchy of Shadows and Undersullen Skies. I feel like they stand out in the Tombs discography and are really strong records. You know, happy about those shows I played, and you know, easy come, easy go. You know, it started with a phone call, it ended with a phone call. Everything's cool. You know, I'm still in, I think, 3 bands with Drew, 2 bands with Ninja, and you know, Mike Hill is just going to continue rolling on as he has with Tombs since their foundation. So, you know, it's all good.
So that's such a mature way of dealing with this, and that's because we've been through some shit, right?
Yeah.
Back when you're 16, if something like this happens,
oh my god,
it's so painful.
Fist fights.
It's like
fist fights.
A band is a part of our identity, whereas now with maturity, especially since you've been in so many projects over the time, it's just a new passage in your life, basically.
Well, I also think part of it is, you know, you begin to separate your creative energy and your creative identity from a single band or a single project, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, I mean, there's stuff that you want to create that doesn't necessarily fit into the world of Cryptopsy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And
I learned that in the first record.
Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, well, just because you're not doing that with Cryptopsy doesn't mean you can't do it, right? And this is why, you know, the projects that continue to be ongoing, you know, they've all had cycled members, they've all had different things, and for me, it's about like, what am I trying to create at this point in time with this group of individuals, right? So like
time capsule almost.
Yeah. So like, Ruinous was three guys from Funebarm, right? And we were continuing this thing forward of like, down-tuned, like mournful, very brutal, influenced by, a lot of like the Finnish and Swedish death metal of old. And that's a vibe, whereas like with Tombs, like the post-rock elements, like some of the cleaner parts, like the more atmospheric bits, like they're awesome, right? But it's a completely different flavor. So, I mentioned I fill in for Hammer Fight, which is Drew's band. Drew plays in Kalopsia, Drew plays in Tombs. Drew is the live bassist for Ruinous, right? And so me and him, like, it's literally a matter of like who's standing in the center and who's standing to the right, and like what tuning are we at, right? And like, and when I'm doing Hammer Fight, it's like, all right, this is Drew's vision. How can I help realize Drew's vision? And then, with Ruinous, it's like this is, my vision with Alex and Sean continuing sort of the work that we were doing before. And then, with Kalopsia, again, it's like, it's the same idea of, hey, we have, it's about like the sort of knuckle dragging aspect of death metal and hardcore, combined, and everybody can contribute to all these ideas, right? I wrote stuff for Tombs, but I didn't write Ruinous songs for Tombs, right? I didn't write Kalopsia songs for Tombs. I wrote Tombs songs for Tombs, and my take on what a Tombs song is like might be a little bit different than other folks that have come in. But I think that, when you are, we live in an era where it's a lot easier to collaborate remotely, and all that sort of stuff. You can work with folks, all over the planet. And so now it's a matter of, are you able to get your fix on the creative stuff that you're working on? And when I was in a band, when I was in bands in high school, it was like, no, there are 7 people in the whole community, right? And I'm in a band with 3 of them, and we're not friends anymore because we had this band break up. So now I've burned 50% of the entire musical population that I have access to, right? You get a little bit older, you get access to a car, and in the modern era, like if you have a recording interface and a decent internet connection, you can jam with guys that you never meet, ever, and put out amazing records because your creative energies are aligned. And that for me is the most important thing. Like if I'm just filling in for a gig or like, then whatever, I'll play pop punk if that's what you need. But if I'm gonna like really put a lot of time and a lot of creative energy, I want to make sure that I'm aligned with the vision. And the cool thing about the Tombs records that I did compared to some of the other stuff in the discography is they're some of the most ferocious records in the whole catalog, and that for me was a big deal, because if it was just going to all be like, a post-rock vibe and no teeth to it whatsoever, it wasn't going to be a good fit. But it turned out that like, still had those classic Tombs hallmarks, but also had like the fastest stuff we ever did, like the heaviest stuff we ever did, just ferocious, and the material speaks for itself. So that for me is like the whole nature of creative collaboration is really just how do our creative energies align at this point in time for what we're trying to create, and then putting that out. And not all fires are meant to burn forever, right? That's the other thing. Like sometimes
that's true, eh? Some of the best bands or some of the best lineups just last for that moment.
Yeah.
And a lot of bands hypothetically should even stop after that, but they don't.
I mean, I just saw, one of my first shows since things opened back up was Immolation was headlining, but it was Mortician and Demolition Hammer, and Demolition Hammer was a band that I thought I would never see live. They put out 3 albums, 2 like really awesome, death thrash albums in the early 90s, and then they kind of went like more groove oriented direction on the 3rd album, and then they broke up. But those first 2 records, I think, are just like Epidemic of Violence is one of my favorite records of all time. And just to see these guys who are like, like I'm in my 40s, these guys are in their, like their first record came out in 1990, right? So, they're playing a song that's 32 years old. So I can't imagine them being, 33, and just, and them getting on stage and just being like, no, this is what we do. It's not like, oh, here's a new song. Same thing with Repulsion. Like Repulsion knows, like, they captured a moment in time that set off an explosion of basically an entire genre of bands. They don't need to put out another record. They don't need to write new songs. They don't need to explore other, adjacent genres. They just need to go up and play a bunch of stuff off Horrified and watch maniacs run in a circle and crash into each other, and they can keep doing that for the rest of their lives, and everyone will be very happy about it.
Kalopsia, there's a new EP coming out in August. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what people can expect. Side question would be, when you're writing for specific projects, how does that work? Is it like, or when you're just sitting there playing guitar? You mentioned there's different tunings, so I imagine that comes into the how this ends up happening. But is there a moment where you're writing a riff and you're like, oh, that's a Kalopsia riff, oh, that's a Ruinous riff, oh, this would have been a Tombs riff? Or is it really like tied into the tuning of the guitar? Because I imagine that affects a lot of it.
Yeah, so one interesting thing about the different tunings, Ruinous is tuned very low. We're tuned to A standard. And so I use heavier strings. I have specific guitars that are set up for that tuning.
Specific projects,
and when you're playing that guitar, right, like everything has to be more forceful, right? So it's like more deliberate. And also like things just resonate a lot more. So there's a lot more sort of like doom elements. And then it also comes back to like how I mentally filter my influences, right? Like, I love old school video games, grew up playing NES. Like, I think the Capcom game soundtracks are awesome, but like they don't come into the forefront of my mind when I'm like trying to write like ignorant hardcore riffs, right? Like that's just, so I'm constantly filtering these things, in and out. And so like, what I always say is Matt from Kalopsia loves Hatebreed. Matt from Ruinous doesn't know who they are, right? Like, and so the, part of it is like, I might be writing something for Kalopsia and be like, oh, that's a Ruinous riff, or vice versa. Same thing with Tombs. Part of it is, I think, I don't know if this is true for everyone who does creative work, but what I have found for myself is I only ever have like 50% max control about what's happening when I'm playing, right? I'm doing something, but the riff or the song or the vibe or the sound is going to take me in a direction, right? And so I know that when I'm in my home studio setup and I'm playing, like I tend to be more dexterous. I tend to write like faster, more technical riffs. But when I'm in a room with a loud amp, right, it becomes a lot more caveman Neanderthal, just because the sheer volume and the impact of like the jud like is way different than when it's on small speakers, when you're really more like so part of it's like what suits the song, what are the identities of the bands, and then where is the creativity sort of taking me in exploring these journeys. So Kalopsia has a 7-inch coming out called Hideous Pleasures, and it's a re-recording of an old song from our first album called Pleasure and Torture, which is just a straight, a tank, just driving super. I'm sorry, let me redact that.
Take it from the top.
Yeah. So Pleasure and Torture, which was recorded originally on our first album, that one's just a really driving, barbaric, simple, primitive, ugly song. And then, when I started the band, 23 years ago, the first riffs I was writing were like really down-tuned, ignorant mosh riffs. And so we just said, you know what, like we should just do a slam song. We should just do a song that's like all ignorant, all guttural vocals, super primitive. And so the A side is devolved into Hideous Frenzy, which is a song about how when you listen to death metal, it lowers your IQ 10 points and you just want to smash things. So
it's not true, people.
Well, when you listen to the stuff I write, and if you're not getting that result, then you need another dose. So that'll be out in August. Ruinous, we're working on a new record right now. One of the things I did over the course of the past couple of years was I organized the sort of backlog of all the various tidbits of stuff, and we actually have like an hour and a half of new material. And so it's just a matter of, when you finally get all the voice memos off your phone, it's amazing how much stuff you actually have. And so again, like I also think about to go back to the second part of the question, I go back to these sort of framing statements or creative lenses that I put on, right? So when I was writing for Tombs, it's like a lot of Tombs' stuff is like dark and meditative, right? Even if it's like a slower, might be like a tremolo thing, but like the note changes are less frequent. It's more sort of like steady.
The
it's
atmosphere.
more, it's about that vibe. It's about that atmosphere. So it's meditative, but it's not meditative in the way that Cynic is meditative, which is much more like about, the light in your heart chakra. This is more like, the gloom of mortality, creeping in on us all. And that kind of leads more into sort of the Ruinous side of things is, it's much more despondent. It's much more about like the horror of, just the brutality of existence through a lens of like, we're all perpetually in a state of creation and destruction, where, whether you look at, generational changes, whether you even just look at the food chain, right? There's creative acts of destruction, and then there's just destruction. And this is what it means to be in reality, right? So there are these cycles. And when I step out of death metal mode, right, it's like all of nature is about cycles, right? You exhale carbon dioxide, plants exhale oxygen, right? You feed each other, right? That's a virtuous cycle, but that's not super brutal. So I'm just going to focus on the fact that, your corpses feed the worms, and the worms feed the birds, and on through that. So, you put things through the death metalizer, and that's a lot different than, Kalopsia is much more about sort of that frenetic energy, but then also just the beatdowns, right? Like that New Jersey, New York thing of like, all right, if no one gets hurt, like, we're not doing it right. So, obviously we don't really want people to get hurt.
We don't
want the illusion.
No,
we want the illusion.
It's the worst. It's the worst thing when it happens.
No.
I've had 2-3 instances. I've had 2-3 times. There you go. I can say it that works. Okay. I've had 2-3 times where people have gotten seriously hurt in the pit, and I feel bad for about it till today. Ooh, I can speak today, I swear.
No, that's, I mean, it's the all right, motherfuckers, I want to see you kill each other, but
yeah,
no, be nice.
Don't really
man.
do it though. Yeah.
Somebody, I go back to, Decade of Aggression, Slayer Live. If somebody goes down in the pit, help them up. That's what we're here to do. Help each other out. That's the real energy. But I want that vibe. I want that Neanderthal, because for me, like, my brain is too busy all the time, right? And so for me, when I'm like really into it, like I saw Mortician, like it's about like, okay, I'm gonna like shut my brain off and be like in a different place. And it's really for me, it's, especially like 2 years of not going to shows. Like 2 years of not going to shows. The first time I like went to a show and like, pushed a guy who wanted to be pushed, I was like, oh, this is medicine. Like, this is medicine for my soul, right? And like, it sounds ridiculous, right? But one of the things over the past couple of years, I think a lot of people have had that sort of moment of, what really matters. And, I always, I live walking distance to St. Vitus. Like, I'm spoiled. I can go to shows like all the time, right? But like, you forget. Like, I think people like us who are fortunate in that we're able to do something that we're so passionate about, we forget how fortunate we are. We forget how fortunate you are to like be able to go to like a cool venue or a cool show, or like be on the road and see cool bands every night and like have that visceral experience. And you go without it for a couple of years. Like, literally the first time I had like a serious like mosh, I was like, holy shit, I feel so much better. I didn't even realize like how nourishing that was, And so, the next show was like, all right, like, let's like understand that this is something that is, and it's ridiculous, right? Because this has been part of my life for like 30 years, right? But it never occurred to me that this is like, this is that spiritual thing, right? I always joke, like, somebody was like, oh, join my church or whatever. I always just send them Pierce from within. I'm like, welcome to my church, right?
That's true. And I was about to say that a lot of people get this same feeling that you're getting from going to gather with like-minded people in a religious setting.
And when I, the first time I jammed with Sean working on, new Ruinous material, like it was the first time I played music like really, really loud, like not with a purpose, like when you're doing a live stream, you're doing a show, right?
You got to get in shape. Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's like, we're practicing, we're rehearsing, and now we're performing, right? This was like, just like unstructured, like, hey, this is a cool idea. Hey, that's a cool idea. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And just loud, like just literally the vibrations of a loud amp, like reverberating in my sternum. I was like, this is transformative. This is incredibly powerful. And, I never really put that together, because I listen to music on headphones all the time, and I said, what, there is something to that. And I remember going back to that first show in 1994, seeing Guar, when they sound checked the bass, like it vibrated my entire skeleton. It was so loud. I was also very small. And just that feeling of like, it's literally shifting the vibration of your entire physical being. This is so incredibly powerful. And so I'm so happy. Like I got to see Immolation, Mortician, Demolition Hammer. I got to see Cerebral Rot last week. I got to see Defeated Sanity and a band called Splattered open for them. I'd never heard them before, and they are awesome.
Vitriol as well. Yeah.
Yes. So just an awesome. It's really restorative for me to like be back in it. It also really highlighted for me the importance of this is not just some dumb weird hobby that's a holdover from when I was a teenager. Like this is a thing that is actually like a transcendent experience in terms of how I experience live music in the world. So
it's a part of your being.
Yeah, and I never took it that seriously. Like I was always serious about doing it, but I never really understood like exactly how significant it was to the scaffolding of my existence. And that for me is like, that's a silver lining of this whole past couple of years of brutality in a different way, is really saying like, okay, you know what, this is something like I need to make time for it. I need to make space for it. I need to experience it. And I also need to like respect it for how important it is, because that wasn't really something I ever really gave a ton of thought to. It was just like, there's a show this weekend. Cool. I'm going to go to the show. Oh, we're doing a tour. Cool. Let's do that tour. But now it's like, okay, no, this for me is a transcendent experience. And if I go too long without it, it will actually affect me in ways that are unseen at first, but that stack up over time. And then, and then I have to do some real repair work, which is, not something I really understood about myself prior to 2020.
You've covered a lot of my upcoming questions, which is amazing. In that one very insightful speech, I love that very much. But there is one thing you didn't cover yet. And when we were setting this up with Michelle Ayoub, a line came out. It's called Ice Bumper Cars and Other Unkept Promises. I don't understand this, but I would love to. So open up about that, please.
Okay, so I met Michelle. She was at a Tomb show in Montreal, and we became fast friends. And so when Ruinous was playing in Montreal in 2019, she came out. We got to hang out a bit, and when she was in New York for a few days, and she sent me a message, and I was like, yeah, let's get together. So we got together. It was a weekday. I was at work. After work, I met her at a coffee shop. We grabbed some coffee, and then we were just kind of doing the walk and talk thing. And it was around Christmas time, and so I guess this must have been like December 2019 or something like that.
I think she was there, and I could be wrong. I think she was there to watch Mr. Bungle. If everything makes sense in my mind. Yes,
that is correct. Yeah. Yes, that was what brought her into town. And so we were just walking around talking. And New York is a dense place where a lot's happening. And we wound up near Rockefeller Center where the Christmas tree is, but they had this thing I'd never seen it before. They had like basically this outdoor skating rink where they had these like bumper cars that were like hovercrafts, bumper cars with giant, but yeah, just like a really like cool, weird like thing, and people were driving around and bumping into each other and laughing, and you know there was like Christmas trees everywhere, and it was like a really fun thing, and we were just walking past it, and we were like, what is that? What is going on over there? And then so like again, you know, partying without drinking. It's like that seems fun. Let's go do that thing. And so, you know, we ran over, we checked it out. You know, we're, you know, both of us are kind of up for anything. So we're like, all right, let's do this. So we tried to find that. We found the admission office, but it was late, and so they were closing. And so I was like standing there, and I was like every trick in the book, like trying to cajole them, like, dude, you don't understand. Like she's from another country, you know, and then I was like, no, you don't understand. This is like a Make-A-Wish kid. Like it's her last wish. Like, you know, trying to get all this stuff done. And then literally, you know, I was like, I didn't know that happened. Us walking and talking is why we stumbled across that. And then I was like, all right, next year, like for sure, like find yourself in New York in November, December, and we'll be there, and we will smash into each other, and it'll be ridiculous, and it'll be fun. And we didn't know that, you know, like 4 months later, the world was going to pause. Yeah. So shout out to Michelle, shout out to Turbo House. I still have an unkept, you know, she has an uncashed check to do, you know, ice bumper cars in New York next time she's down. So yeah, it was a fun time. And you know, we'll do that hopefully November, December this year.
I love that very, very much. And massive cheers to Michelle and the Turbo House crew and staff. And it's just a great place. If you haven't been there in Montreal on St. Denis Street, you absolutely should. I love them. And I handpick their craft beer that is on tap every week. And it's killer. So you should definitely go there. Matt, this was amazing. I really had a great time connecting with you, talking about life, talking about metal, talking about your sobriety.
I want to pause before we wrap. I got to rewind one thing, because there's one question that you generally ask that you haven't asked. And yes. It's about Montreal.
Sure. Yeah. This is a Heavy Montreal Presents Vox and Hops episode. So I would love to hear what your biggest Montreal story would be. How do you feel about Montreal? What does Montreal mean to you?
So Montreal for me is actually like one of the most important cities in the world. It is probably the place I would move if I were to like leave the US.
Really?
Yeah, I love Montreal. I love everything about it. And my metal history is deeply intertwined with Montreal. So the first Kalopsia record we actually recorded at Victor Studio.
Hell yes, I've worked there too. Yeah.
Yeah, with JF from Cataclysm produced the record.
Yeah.
So in 2002 was my first time in Montreal. It was also my first time leaving the United States. And it was before passports were required to go into Canada. And so
not those passports, people.
So we drove up. We did the entire album in 4 days, recording and mixing. You know, I was sleeping on JF's living room floor, and you know, lots of poutine and other shenanigans. We were supposed to wrap at midnight, and then head back. I had to get back for school at the time, and we wound up mixing until 7 o'clock in the morning. Wow. And then going to JF's place, grabbing our stuff and leaving. It was an amazing time. And then that was a beginning. And then also Montreal, the Roar Festival was the last show I played with Funeral Arm. So we played with Blasphemy and a bunch of other great bands. And actually one of the guys at the Cerebral Rock show last week, you know, mentioned that show, and I was like, holy shit, that show was bananas. Right. Just killer bands, killer vibe, killer show. And you know, unknown to me at the time that would, you know, I would leave Funeral Arm shortly thereafter. So that was the last show that, you know, Alex, Sean, and I did with Funeral Arm, and all that stuff happened in Montreal. So yeah, just love that city. Can't wait to go back, waiting for things to, open back up, and then we'll find ourselves there, and we'll definitely find ourselves at Turbo House at some point.
Oh, hell yes. Hell yes. And they also have very good non-alcoholic beer, which I also helped choose from Le Bazar. I don't know if you mess around with non-alcoholic beer, but if you do, I'll have a choice for you there. Very happy that we spent some time together. This was amazing. I really, really appreciate hanging out with you, Matt. Great time just listening to you be so open about everything. I really, really, really had a great time. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Can't wait to hang out in the flesh, face to face. Massive cheers to Michelle Ayoub for helping organize this. Dominic from Pitch Black North for hooking us up with some delicious, hydrating, blasphemous liquids from Pitch Black North. This was great. I'm gonna I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, was this ever a great conversation. Just so much fun to dig into Matt and his mindset about writing collaboratively. Really opened up my eyes of like being in the moment, connecting with someone, writing that album, and then maybe just stepping away. It's just something that I thought about a lot since the conversation. Massive cheers to Matt. I can't wait to hang out with him at Turbo House with Michelle Ayoub. Massive cheers to Matt. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast mailing list. You can get it on my website, voxandhops.com. That's VOXANDHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive 2 emails a month, which will contain all of the details of everything that has happened recently in the world of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. You'll get to see which episodes I've dropped recently. You'll get to see which episodes I have coming up. You will get to see which albums the Vox and Hops album review crew have reviewed recently. And you'll get to see which albums Jerry Monk, the metal architect himself, has put on the Brutal Awakenings playlist, which is available on both Apple Music and Spotify. There is just so much going on in the world of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. I'd hate for you to miss a single thing, so sign up to the mailing list. The Vox and Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media and Evergreen Podcasts. I hope you have a great rest of the week. I have one more episode coming out on Friday, but until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.